Well, hello, everyone. This is Lisa Nirell, and welcome to our live stream. We are so happy that you're here. It is August 21st. And if this is the first time that you're joining the Mindful Marketer live stream, know that you are welcome, and we would love to know where you're from. I am Lisa Nirell. I'll tell you a little bit about my company and why we have these weekly Mindful Marketer live streams. And then we'll introduce our special guest. Through our books here at Energized Growth, we work with a number of marketing leaders and CEOs to help them accelerate growth and marketing innovation in times of crisis and uncertainty. Today's session from the Mindful Marketer live stream is intended to help you align your culture and your marketing around the people who matter the most, your customers and your employees. And that requires an important skill that we have found has become increasingly difficult to manage and to convey, and that is empathy. As you know from hearing about today's live stream, our focus is about the return to empathy. So before I introduce my special guest, Martin Lindstrom, let me step back, and let's all step back for a moment and take a look at what is shifting here, at least in the United States. There's a concerted effort as we watched the Democratic National Convention this week to shift our society's discussion from vitriol, blame, and shame to kindness and empathy. And as we saw at the Democratic Convention, which of course was completely virtual, empathy was one of the cornerstone themes. And as you know from my work as an author, a trusted advisor, and a speaker, what I am sharing is often contrary to traditional beliefs. The one traditional belief that I hear from some people is that politics and business, it should never be mixed. But whether we like it or not, the genie is out of the bottle. And politics, personal, and business today are all intertwined. So today we're very fortunate to have an empathy expert with us to dive in deeper to this important topic. So before we start, please remember, this is a live stream and you get to post your questions. So I'll be watching and monitoring our live streams across both LinkedIn, Facebook, and we'll also be saving all of these on our events page, which is at lisanirell.com/events. So if you have to hop off, know that we will have replays available for you there and my YouTube channel. So Martin Lindstrom joins us today from Switzerland. We both met through a fantastic community called the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches Community. Martin is the author of 7 books, I believe now, and joins us today from Switzerland. Hi, Martin.
Hi, good to see you. You look fantastic.
Thank you. I didn't even pay him to say that. Thank you, Martin. I really appreciate your being here. I know it's getting late in the day, and it's you already started the weekend there in Switzerland.
Which means I had to get drunk and silly, right?
No.
I'm glad you didn't catch me with too much alcohol in my blood.
No, remember, this is the Mindful Marketer live stream. So we find joy and we get high on mindfulness and present moment awareness and empathy, remember? So yes, I'm just really glad to see you again. And I love to dive in and just start talking about what you and I are seeing, because, you know, I'm here on this side of the pond, you're there in Switzerland. I think this is an important time to just get a level set on what are you seeing with your clients and across the world in terms of the collective emotions that your clients are feeling right now.
Well, I think there's many things happening right now, of course. There's been sort of 2 categories of clients. The first category has been those whom went into panic and they were peddling around doing what they always have done, but they really didn't use this as an opportunity to change. And then you had the second category, which sat down and they basically redesigned the entire business platform, and they got an enormous amount of value out of this. And so I've really seen those two different directions. Sadly, the first category is very big. Those who took this opportunity and really went with it, though, they've gone through the roof. And they really have used it both to rebuild their culture, their brand, and the position in the market. So that's one thing. If I drilled into my work with neuroscience, as you may recall, back in the days, I invented a term called neuromarketing, with the idea of using neuroscience to understand how we feel and think at a subconscious level and how emotions impact us. And we conducted the largest study in the world, where we scanned more than 2,000 consumers using fMRI. And one of the key things I discovered in the study back then was that we have an area in the brain called a somatic marker. Somatic marker is a term invented by, sorry?
One second. I apologize, Martin. From time to time, I'm going to interrupt you because this is the joy of live streaming, okay? Sometimes there is a pause in the sound because we are upgrading our technology here, and some of the technology did not yet arrive in the Federal Express. So I would like to repeat what you said. You talked about fMRI. Would you, for the benefit of our audience, which is now from England, we have someone from Northern California, we have a host of other people listening. Tell us about fMRI and then transition into the somatic marker conversation. It's so fascinating.
Absolutely. fMRI is standing for Functional Magnetic Resonance Imaging Technology. And it's, as you know, one of the most sophisticated ways of assessing certain aspects of our health. We decided back in 2008 to raise $7 million, and we recruited people from across the world. And what we wanted to understand was, how does our subconscious behavior act? And one of the most famous experiments we did were that we gave people the option of having their brain scanned, and then we piped in Coca-Cola and Pepsi into the respondent as they had their brain scanned. And first we called the Pepsi for A, and we called Coca-Cola for B. They didn't know what was what. They could then press the little button while they were in the scanner, and we also scanned the brain at the same time. And what we realized was, as they were lying in the scanner, they loved A. Absolutely loved A, which were Pepsi. But then this surprising thing happened. When the scientists went into the lab and they told the respondents lying in this scanner, A is Pepsi and B is Coke, the taste preference center in the brain changed its mind. It literally changed its mind and said, no, sorry, I like B more. Even though the taste actually was preferred by A, because the brand was overriding the taste preference. And that's really the first time, to my knowledge, in history, we've been able to prove the true impact of brands. So I wrote back in the days a book called Biology, B-U-Y-ology. And just recently, I wrote another ebook for free for the world, reflecting on what's happening with the coronavirus. But this is really my starting point into this whole space of neuromarketing and this fascinating world, understanding how we behave as consumers.
Yes, neuromarketing is really a fascinating area. And, it also brings us to how brands are operating today versus when you did that study. When you did the study, I don't think our world was in a state of collective grief, if not trauma, from the coronavirus. So what do you think still applies from what you learned from those very deep studies? And what do you think might be different now that as leaders we need to better understand?
Well, I work with a philosophy which some of you guys watching, and certainly you, Lisa, will be very familiar with, which I call entry points. We have 7 entry points in our life. One is the first day to school. One is the first day I'm being married. One is the first day I get a child, or when I retire. These are very dramatic changes in my life. And every time it happens, we suddenly open up our eyes for a whole new world. That's the reason why when you're expecting a newborn baby, everything is baby strollers everywhere. I'm sure you tried that. It's crazy how we really change filters according to what entry points we are part of. Now, I would claim for the first time ever in living history, living mind, that we have all been exposed to an 8th entry point. An 8th entry point is really due to a global synchronized behavioral change among consumers worldwide. And that has happened for multiple reasons. One is due to isolation. We sadly see that a lot of people get very depressed, their lack of sense of purpose in life, and suicide rate has more than tripled over this period. The lack of touch is another factor. As you talked about in the opening of your segment, empathy and the lack of empathy because we wear masks is also another factor. So all these behavioral changes are really interesting. And if I just go back to touch for a second, I was in Sydney just some time ago, and I saw this old lady approaching a dog. There was a dog owner passing by, and she started to pet it. And I didn't think a lot about it until day after. Can you believe it? There was another old lady approaching another dog owner, and I never seen it twice. In fact, I saw it 3 times in a week. And I thought to myself, why is this happening? And the reason why is because we've suppressed each other from the sense of touch. Touch is back to our tactile sensation, and that's the biggest organ we have on our body. And when you suppress it, you actually become depressed. We know from multiple experiments done with rats that if you touch the rats, they live longer. If you don't touch them over a certain period, they actually die. And we are now being impacted by this. And the reason why we see people desperately touching other things is also played out in how our behavior is in terms of what products we buy. The number of pets being sold has gone up more than 100% over the last 2 months. Because we want someone to be close to us and touch things. It's almost like a subconscious drive we have. And all of this goes back to the 8th entry point. So really, with every major change happening in our society, what happens is that there's new opportunities. And I don't need to tell you, the 8th entry point is really a dramatic opportunity for companies to understand how to appeal to a new generation which have undiscovered needs we never seen or heard about before.
Yes, and you also really opened my eyes. We were participating together in a session with Marshall Goldsmith, one of our Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches programs, and you opened my eyes to this concept of somatic markers. Now, marketing people who are watching this, we have some marketers from London and from California and Atlanta, Georgia, and people might be scratching their heads saying, why the hell do I need to know about all of these neuroscience facts and figures? I am a marketer or I'm a CEO. Why should I care? I'd love for you to address that.
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is a brand is not produced in a factory, it's produced in our minds. And the more emotions you can wrap around a product or a service, the stronger degree of loyalty is established and the more I can charge for it. But the issue is today it's very hard and difficult to measure a brand. One of the most famous retailers back in the day say, I know that 50% of my retail marketing budget works. I just don't know which 50% it is. And I think we, to some extent, still are there, even though we are increasingly able to measure things online. But there's still a sense of brands there whenever I buy a Louis Vuitton or a new car. So using neuroscience to understand how it impacts me, whether that is because I lack self-esteem, or maybe I feel depressed, or maybe I want to change something in my life, or whatever it is, these drivers are incredibly important to understand because they help us to understand who we're communicating with. So A somatic marker is actually a term I fell in love with many years ago. A somatic marker is something so dramatic you'll never forget it. It's invented by Antonio Damascus. He's a Portuguese professor who lives in the US today. And a somatic marker is really what 9/11 was. I think both you and I clearly remember not just where we were, but also who we were together with, and even who we called on that day. Where were you, by the way, on that day?
I'll tell you where I was, and I want to know where you were. 9/11, when I was married, my ex-husband and I, we lived in San Diego, California. I had just 3 weeks before that finished a consulting assignment in the World Trade Center. I was an advisor to some of the senior executives at Oppenheimer funds. And I get all choked up thinking about it, but I was home and it was at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time that my parents called and said, turn on the TV right now. And that was literally my wake up call to the debacle and the tragedy. So I remember the colors of the day. I remember what I was wearing. I remember exactly what the time slices were. What about you? Where were you and what was happening?
Well, before I tell you what happened with me, I just want to say one thing, Lisa, which I think you will find intriguing. A study was conducted about somatic markers on Manhattan. And what the study clearly showed were the closer you were to ground zero, the more people remember the sense of smell, touch, taste, and sound. Our brain works in the way that we have 5 tracks. We're recording each of the 5 senses on. And the more track I am recording a brand message on, the more I remember it. And I don't need to tell you, a somatic marker is extraordinary. It's called a negative somatic marker because it literally puts a bookmark into your brain. And if you're really impacted by it, you literally will remember these 5 senses as well. Where I was in Paris that day, and it was crazy because the Parisians were really structured around this. I remember within 2 hours, the police were driving around the streets in Paris, removing all the bins and replacing them with plastic bins. So they were really prepared for a terrorist attack in France within hours. And one of my clients, can you believe it, was American Express. And I believe they were in World Trade Tower 2, and that completely collapsed. So my client literally disappeared within an hour, which was crazy. So it certainly had a strong impact on me and, of course, all the poor souls which are impacted by this.
Yeah, it was. And as you say, it's unforgettable. And the pandemic will be unforgettable as well. And it's just more insidious because it is not a one-time event or a series of a couple of events. It is this slow burn that just keeps burning, a flame that we don't even know where the flame is, right? I mean, we can't eradicate the flame yet, but we will.
No, exactly. I think that's the reason why it is a somatic marker, because it really will have a profound impact on us and our behavior in the future. Either it will have a direct or else it will have an indirect impact. By indirect, I mean, yes, for sure, we may go back to normal, whatever normal is. But I think that the reality is as well that businesses across the world have realized that they save a lot of money with this as well. And that means that they literally will have home offices as part of the reality. People will travel less. I'm pretty sure that the air traffic will drop to 50% in the near future. We spend a lot of time interviewing CEOs from airline companies around the world. Some of the airlines, like Lufthansa Group, which is one of the largest players in Europe, are first estimating to be up and running 100% by 2030. So it gives you a sense of that because we work in home, not just necessarily because the virus is here, because once the virus is gone, the cost impact has been so severe that, in fact, we will have to change our lives at home. And that will have a profound impact of how we work. I don't need to tell you how we shop, how we live, how we entertain ourselves. And we see that a lot with a lot of our ethnographic studies we've done during the whole pandemic to understand how is the consumer mindset changing. And I tell you, it is profound.
Yeah. I'd like you to share with us, before you share with us, maybe an example of a company that recognized that quickly and was able to better align with the emotional ethos of their customers. Before we go there, because I know you are a consummate storyteller and you have so many decades of experience, tell everybody what year you started your agency, by the way.
Well, it's a crazy story. I was 12 years of age. I was a huge Lego fan. And I decided to build up a Legoland in my mom's and dad's backyard. And guess what? What happened was that no one showed up except my mom and dad. Now, this was hard work. It took me about a year to develop my Legoland. So I was very, very disappointed. So I went down to a local advertising agency and I persuaded them to sponsor me. God knows how I did it. I don't know. And two days later, they put an ad in the paper and I had 131 visitors to my Legoland. There was just one problem. Visitor number 130 and visitor number 131 were the lawyers from Lego suing me. And they said, it's our brand. And I said, what's a brand? I mean, I was 12 years old back then. And I said, I bought all my boxes. And they said, no, you can't use the trademark Lego. Now, they were good, I have to say, admittedly. They actually said, well, why don't we do a deal? Why don't you get a job at Lego? So I was the youngest kid getting a job at Lego at the age of 12, which a little bit was like Willy Wonka, the Chocolate Factory story, right?
It is.
Dream place. So I learned a lot during that period. It was fantastic. And after that, I got Lego as a client, Legoland as a client, and started up my advertising agency that very year, and sold it to BBDO when I was 18. But it was crazy because I really began very young and have been working in the industry now for more than 30 years, which is crazy, right?
It is a little crazy, but yeah, welcome to the land of crazy entrepreneurs. I'm glad we're kindred spirits. I also want to step back because I'm a big fan of Plato, and I know the path to wisdom begins with a common set of definitions. I want to step back just to make sure we don't overuse and abuse the term empathy. And there are different types of empathy. So as we're going through this conversation and people are watching, I want to invite people to look at a recent marketing or branding initiative that they undertook and ask yourself, what level of empathy are we really practicing in our organization? You already know these, but the first level is cognitive empathy, where you're not sympathizing with someone. You're just able to say, I understand that you're going through a difficult time with work from home. And it just must be a real challenge for you. So the cognitive empathy that I saw early on, Martin, was right when the pandemic hit. Do you remember the number of airlines and hospitality companies that came out and sent out these very vanilla emails that said, dear customer, oh, you really captured my heart there. Dear customer, we know it's a difficult time for you. Okay, well, thanks very much for that generic, useless email. We're still open for business. Okay, that's super. So there's the cognitive empathy, and then there's the second level that I hear about, which is the emotional empathy of, we know a pandemic is difficult and here's how we feel it too. We're going through the same challenges that you are. I think Joe Biden did that brilliantly last night at the Democratic National Convention when he showcased a young boy who also suffered from stuttering, which Joe Biden also suffered from as a younger person. He's like, no, I'm not just going to talk about it. I'm going to show you what I went through. And then the third level is the compassionate empathy of all of those behaviors, plus the willingness to help the person take action to address that difficulty. How many brands are able to navigate to that third level, and what's your perspective on that?
Well, it's a great question. It's also a very difficult question to answer because there's multiple layers to my answer. one of the things which are really important to understand is that you need to have your house in order as a company before you start to navigate those three levels, because the third level you talk about requires you to really have almost simulated potential crisis beforehand so you can react very quickly. I think one thing I've learned is it's in times of need you really build a powerful brand. Think about it. When you think about any experience you've had where brand really has been very welcoming to you, it probably was when you're out traveling or something like that, and a hotel really took well care of you when you were in need, and they went over and above to help you. And that really created such a positive somatic marker in your brain that you'll never forget them for it. That's certainly what I learned when we started to work with, for example, airline companies, that they need to go further. And here's my message to all of you guys. During this pandemic, don't use marketing money in the conventional way. Instead, allocate them to help people and go one step further than anyone else. And the best way for me to illustrate that is an example I had from Hyundai, which is a car company. It's actually something I'm writing about in this free ebook. You can see the URL down there.
Yes,
if you
yes.
copy this URL, you can get a free copy of my latest ebook. It's called The Biology for Coronavirus World. And in this book, I explain how Hyundai, in fact, do something extraordinary. During the crisis, they go out and say, well, the car sales has dropped. We know that. Why is it dropping? Where the entire car industry in 2008, when we had a big crisis was taking place, they thought, okay, well, people obviously don't have the money, so we're not going to sell any cars unless we discount our brand. Well, all these car companies were almost going down the drain. Hyundai went the opposite way. They said, why don't we find out why people are not buying the car? And what they realized was people actually do have the money. They're just afraid of spending them. So what they did was to create the Hyundai warrant. And this guarantee was really that if you buy a car and you lose your job within a year, you can return the car at any given point, no questions asked, and they will return all the money. And Hyundai, I spoke to the CEO about it, and Hyundai sales went up 14% the first year, and the second year it went up 13%. And what was really fascinating was, how many cars, Lisa, do you think were returned?
Oh my gosh. 5%, 10%?
5 cars. 5 cars. And that shows everything coming back to your questions regarding empathy. If you communicate the right message to the right audience at the right time, empathy really can do wonders. I think the key issue now is, quite frankly, for all of you guys watching, how well do you understand the mindset of your customer right now during this pandemic and post-pandemic? Do you know how people have changed? Do you know what the 8th entry point are? Or do you just assume it's business as usual, seen from your world point of view? Remember, empathy is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of another person, i.e. the consumer, and see the world from that person's point of view, feel the pain, feel the opportunities, all that stuff. And I think companies are pretty bad at that, to be quite frank, because they just look at numbers and reports and statistics, but that does not convey the sense of empathy. It does not give you a true sense of what feelings are all about. So that's what I'm really focusing a lot on.
I believe too, again, being a bit of a provocateur, this is the year. If we don't do it this year as marketing leaders, we're never going to seize this moment to take our entire marketing organization, pull out our calendars and say, what percentage of my day do I spend actually talking to customers? I'm not hiding behind a focus group or a survey or an email campaign, or worse yet, please do not hide behind personalization on your damn website. I mean, these things are nice and they're part of the mix. I get it. But Martin, do you know how many conversations I've had with CMOs who say, yeah, I spend about 3% of my day, if that, talking to a real customer.
Probably most. I mean, I remember I did a speech at the Radio City Music Hall last year, and there was about 6,000 people in the audience, and I asked everyone to raise their hand if they've spent time in a random consumer home over the last year. And I would probably claim those 20 hands being raised. And that is super scary because we all use excuses for not doing it. I mean, right now, I bet most people's excuse is, I can't talk to them. I'm stuck behind my doors. No, that's not right. Every day I am connecting with consumers through the virus, where we basically go straight into people's homes randomly across the world, and they go around with the cameras and I go into the fridge and I go into the cupboards and we talk and we connect and we learn from that exercise. And it's extraordinary how much you can learn in such a short period of time. I want to give you an example about how far this can go. I mean, there's an example from an Australian company, which when the pandemic happened, realized, hey, there's something interesting going on. People actually are spending more time decorating their homes. So they invented a very smart technique. You know, when in the old days, when you're decorating your homes, you want to find exactly that color, and you can't sort of bring that whole table with you into the paint store. Well, they created something called a pico, which is the concept is called tint pico. And really, it's very simple. It's a little, looks like a little stick, like a lipstick type of thing. You put it up against the painting or up against the curtain, and it measures exactly the color of what it is. And then it can send it digitally, and the paint will arrive in the mail, which is really crazy. And they launched this in the middle of the pandemic, and it took off like nothing ever seen before. And that was really fascinating because they said to me the pandemic really opened up a huge opportunity, and they were exactly riding on that in the right way. That is for me an eighth entry point, right? And I think to discover these things, you need to spend time with consumers and really understand their mindset to see that. Because here's the issue: you quite often are too close to the forest to see the trees, meaning you spend so much time in survival mode that you forget about the consumer is actually evolving at the same time. And in fact, the needs may go the opposite way. I'll give you another example. A client of ours is called MDI. They're a mid-sized food distribution company in the US, based out of North Carolina. And these guys have helped the independent retailers to grow. And what they did during this whole event was they said, hey, we can't run a physical food fair anymore, which actually was meant to go on air last week. So they converted everything in a matter of 2 months to become pure online, like a real show, amazing show, a little bit like the Democratic Convention, just in a smaller scale. But then they did one clever thing. They said, listen, how do we convey the five senses to all these independent retailers who have to buy food? How do you do that normally? Food show where you smell. So we invented these physical boxes, almost like an advent calendar. You know, when you open these small lids and you have chocolate in it.
Oh, yes, well, little flaps.
Exactly. They created gigantic boxes, and each of these boxes contained samples from all the big brands around the world. And they really shipped them out. Every week there was a new box, and they could open one little box every day. And they had a live broadcast going on for each of the retailers, which are showing now I'm opening it. And they had a live feed straight into the lab kitchen of a big company, showing how it was invented, this particular flavor or whatever it was. And suddenly we used bricks and mortar as a clicks and mortar format. And we did all this transformation in a matter of 8 weeks. Now I've seen a lot of food shows online, and they're all been more or less lousy because they all are spreadsheets and a lot of products you can click on a la Amazon. But the MDI went really the opposite way. They choose to say, hey, why don't we use our senses in an extraordinary way? Why don't we use power storytelling? They created small mini case videos, beautiful videos about these independents fighting to make the local community survive. That is what I'm thinking about. But you can only do that if you listen to the consumer or the customer, right?
I love that. And what is the name of the company? Is it M as in Mary?
MDI, Merchant Distributors, MDI, and they're based in North Carolina.
Merchant Distributors Incorporated. Props to them. Maybe we should have them on a Mindful Marketer live stream sometime.
Yeah,
because that is so clever. That's so clever, and it's not this huge multi-million-dollar initiative. I mean, it was something you could do quickly and put together rather quickly, and on a budget, I would expect.
You definitely can do that. And I think this is really my message. I'm just putting the URL here so you can check them out there. You won't be able to see the food show though, because it's for closed doors, right? But yeah, use it as your opportunity. As one of our clients said, the president of Lowe's, he said to me, listen, Martin, those who go through this crisis without changing did not get the message. He said to me, the innovation process we went through together with Lowe's to transform the entire chain of stores, it took around 6 years. He said, we did exactly the same this time in 6 weeks. And we completely changed our entire platform because we used this as an opportunity rather than sitting down and going into depression. That's my message to everyone. This is the moment to change if you are North America. If you're in Europe, well, my message is we probably sadly will see a second wave. Be prepared and use it as an opportunity to adapt to a whole new market behavior. Again, the 8th entry point, right?
Yes, absolutely. Now, I also want to give you some credit because I still have trouble believing that you visited over 2,000 homes to gather research for one of your other books, Small Data. That was about 5 years ago that you did that. How did that change you as a person and as a marketing leader? What did that do for you?
It's amazing. I hate it and I love it at the same time. It's very hard because before the pandemic hit the world, I was spending 300 days a year on a plane, and I'm really not kidding. People think I'm oversaturating. This is the truth. So typically, I would visit up to 77 different countries a year, moving in with people, spending time in their home to learn. And the philosophy is very simple. If I'm asking a company, a CEO of a company to change, if I'm not taking my own medicine and looking into their customers and doing it myself, well, then how can I ask their senior staff to do it? So quite often I would go with the senior staff of organizations, and I've done everything from being a person working on an airline company, serving on purpose to see how the customer service was. I've been working on oil platforms. We've been working in pharmaceutical in the companies, in labs to understand that. But I also spend time in consumer homes a lot. So, and I think it's more than 2,000 today, to be frank. Small data was really designed around showing that there is the opposite to big data, which is small data, what we define as seemingly insignificant observations you make in people's lives. And that's really another format of ethnographic. And yes, I did it every day. I do it today virtually, but as soon as I'm allowed to, I will for sure continue doing it in real homes, because do you know what? It keeps you alive and it makes you understand what's going to happen next. People always say to me, how are you able to, like in the book URL I put down there on the link now, how are you able to predict the future? And I say, well, it's very simple. I just spend time with consumers and they tell me what the future is. But sadly, very few people have time to do it, right?
Right. Well, I think now we must make the time. It's very similar to the questions I get when I do keynotes or virtual keynotes. And I tell people, okay, I've written a couple books. I've got 500 blog posts, and, I'm writing and producing these live streams now. That's my new experiment. And they'll say, oh, I have a book in mind. And I'll say, well, what are you doing with it? Oh, nothing. I'm too busy. Writing a book is hard. And I'll say, yeah, we've got to start and take the first step. We just have to put it on your calendar and say, I am going to talk with this number of customers this week. And that time on my calendar is sacred. And as long as your CEO is willing to acknowledge that and not hijack your calendar, then you've got to have those tough conversations. If there's nothing else you take and remember from today's session with Martin Lindstrom and myself, it is that we no longer have any excuses to not interact and be empathetic with our customers and our employees. We only have 3 minutes left. And I want to wrap up with a couple of questions for you, Martin. Sharon just sent us a comment, by the way, and said she loved your book, Small Data.
No, thank you.
Loved it.
Thank
yes.
you, Sharon.
Sharon's one of our CMO community members, so welcome to her. And I have an academic from London, Richard from London, just said, I'm not in business, I'm an academic. I'm finding this discussion fascinating. What do you see or think is a key message for those of us who are leaders in the public sector?
Well, it's a really good question. And the answer is very simple. I think the public sector need to understand their population better. They need to spend more time getting closer to, in many ways, their voters. One of the things I'm doing is, if we take a look at hospitals, for example, one of the things I did for a while was to understand, how does it feel like to be a patient? So I actually dressed up as a patient. I was rolled into an operation theater, and then I went through the whole system, lying down to experience everything from a patient point of view. And one of the things I realized when I went into the fMRI scanner was the fear of being into this huge machine and all the sound and the noise. So we sat down with our innovation team and we started to create a new format of scanning, where we actually converted the entire scanner into a sandcastle. We decided as a sandcastle, we had the sound of the beach, we had the sound of the seagull, we had everything decorated like this, because I realized for small kids, it's incredible scary to be exposed for this big machinery. And suddenly it was like a day on the beach in this very big sandcastle. And this is my feedback to you. There's a lot of things in the public sector where you interact with ordinary people like you and I. But quite often, I think people in government and in the public sector forget about how it feels like to be on the other side. Feels like to be standing there in unemployment line and asking for some payment going through, or how does it feel like when you suddenly have lost your driver license, or when you want to have a new car? All these different situations and scenarios. I think the public sector need to understand it from a layman's point of view, map it down as a customer journey, and then design the processes around it. Sadly, I think the reality today is that few people are doing it. And that's the reason why we get these clumsy design scenarios where it really is painful as an ordinary person to go through the public sector and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we have one more wrap-up comment here from Drew in DC, and then we're going to call it a good day here, a good Friday. Drew says, visiting consumers in their home ground reveals where their passions lie. Garage or bathroom visits are very illuminating. Can you share some ideas on how you synthesize the insights and then scale those insights? Thanks, Drew.
Well, Drew, thank you. I'm going to wrap up then with a story. It will take 2 minutes, Lisa. I hope that's okay. Many years ago, the Lego company was in a huge crisis. The computer games had really attacked them in a big way, and they really didn't know what to do. And they were relying on big data big way. But the conclusion really was that the instant gratification generation had arrived, and kids would have no patience whatsoever to play with Lego. So this is a true story. A small team from Lego moves into a young kid. It's an 11-year-old boy in Germany. And they sit on the floor, and one of the executives is asking this kid one question: what are you most proud of? And the kid pauses, and then he points at the shelf where there's an old, worn-down pair of sneakers. He said, that one. And of course, the Lego team is completely perplexed. They're thinking, why? Why is he picking down an old, worn-down pair of smelly sneakers? So they ask him why, and the kid is saying, well, because do you see this wear and tear that is on the side? Exactly that angle is the reason why I'm proud, because it shows that I'm the best skater in town. And that's the reason why Lego suddenly changed, because what they realized from that insight was that a kid who is willing to spend thousands of hours of fine-tuning exactly that angle of the shoe, why wouldn't that kid spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours playing with Lego? And out of that, they actually changed the size of the Lego bricks back to tiny bricks. They invented the Lego movie, which became one of the best selling movies of all time. And Lego became the largest brand in its category by far. And that is an example about small data in action. That is to identify the seemingly insignificant observations and turn them into a product opportunity.
Yes, and what a great lesson from that young boy. Are you sure that young boy wasn't you, Martin?
I'm pretty sure about that.
Okay. And how many Legos do you and your family have in your home in Switzerland?
Actually, I don't have a lot of Lego around me here, but because I'm downstairs in my studio, but upstairs I actually do have quite a lot of things. I actually have the very first piece of Lego ever produced, which were not a plastic toy, but a wooden duck, which is the very first SKU ever developed by the Lego company many years ago. So yeah, I'm a big fan still today.
Well, I think if we stay curious and have that childlike sense of wonder as marketing leaders, as C-suite executives, we are going to discover those wooden ducks in our own businesses. And
Definitely, yeah.
I think that's important. Well, Martin, it's been so nice to see you today. And I know it's getting late out there. I hope that glass of clear liquid is not vodka. I want everyone to know two things. This is really important here. Martin's coming back to join us October 2nd, Friday, October 2nd. The Mindful Marketer live streams are the first 3 Fridays of every month from 1:30 to 2:10 plus or minus. So I hope you will all come back. And between now and October 2nd, I'm going to count on each of you to sign up for our newsletter and our Mindful Marketer bonuses that are in the lower corner there. And send me an email with your questions for Martin and I for the October 2nd session. I think it'll be fun for us to do some more interactive Q&A then, Martin.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure being on your show. I'll open a bottle of wine straight away. You're still in business mood, I know. So you probably had to wait a couple of hours. But listen, thanks for having me on your show, and listen to all of you guys out there. Good luck, and to navigate these really, really difficult, but also I have to say very interesting times.
It's an honor and a privilege to know you and to get to collaborate with you on these endeavors, Martin. So hang loose. I'm just going to wrap up here and tell people what's coming up next, and then we'll say goodbye. Everyone, remember that the next Mindful Marketer live stream is coming up September 4th. That's Friday, September 4th. And I will be hosting, and my special guest will be Michael Taylor, joining us from Simple Mind to really play off what we've discussed today. How do you take that knowledge around your customers and your employees to reboot your brand message for what we call now the now normal? So that's our show today. Again, best of success to you, Martin, and to all of you who spent this Friday afternoon with us today. And I want to thank you, and stay mindful, stay sane, and be kind to everyone. Thank you.